So today we have Jon Downes. Welcome, Jon, to Whole Man Academy podcast number 3.
Thank you.
Welcome to the show. And how are you today?
I'm very well today, thank you. Yeah, it's been an interesting time just adjusting to the changing world circumstances, but today is a good day.
Well, how's it affecting you personally? I mean, you don't live in London, as I don't at the moment. So being out in the sticks a little bit more, how's things kind of changed for you on that?
Yeah, it's been interesting. I have been keeping in contact with my brother who lives in London just to see if there's any different advice and guidance given there. But yeah, I mean, we've been defining who our family is because we have quite a lot of people come through the house and working out how we're going to keep ourselves safe, working out who's vulnerable. Yeah, that's I think we've sort of got that in hand now.
And have you been stockpiling food?
I think we've got enough if something happens to it. But we were just talking today whether we should buy some chickens because we get through an awful lot of eggs. So
yeah, do we live chickens or?
Yeah, some live chickens. Yeah.
And what about? Do you have any kind of vegetable patch action or anything you can kind of?
Yeah, we do. We've got a veggie patch which we've had a go at using in previous years, but my wife in particular this year is like, right, we're going to get this up and running. So yeah, we inherited the house a couple of years ago, and there's quite a lot of good stuff planted there. So we're going to make the most of that this coming few months. Yeah.
Now, talking about the house, I mean, we're about to go on to the first topic, which is understanding uncertainty. But actually, one thing that you've got at your house is a swimming pool, and we speak quite a lot about the morning routine for guys. And just tell us quickly, you through the winter kind of were hitting it hard of going out all weathers, and how can I put it, getting in the freezing water. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so we were delighted to have a pool at the house, and I just thought, I wonder how long I can keep swimming in it without heating it during the winter.
Yeah.
And it's November and then December, and I just thought I'm going to see if I can keep going all the way through, which I managed to. So I do about 100 meters in the morning. It's last year it got down to about 4 degrees with a crack of some ice across the top. This year it's been much more mild. It's got down to more like 8 degrees.
Yeah.
But I know that, swimming, exercise, and particularly cold water swimming is really good for mental health. So yeah, as part of that morning routine, if I can sort of get in the pool, do 10 lengths and get out, that's almost, something achieved in the day already, and I feel really fresh. Yeah,
it's an early win. How do you feel when you get out?
That's an interesting, exhilarated, and slightly like I'd like to get back in again, but not enough to actually get back in again. And I think the other interesting thing, if it's raining or if it's cold when I get out, I don't feel any of that at all. So yeah, it just feels amazing. Yeah, and cold.
I think that's the important one. We wrote about that on the Whole Man Academy newsletter a few weeks ago, even about taking cold showers and the health benefits of it. We find that usually most mornings I'll do 1 to 2 minutes of cold shower. And when I get out, I don't feel the cold as much for quite a while after. And you feel invigorated. So it's such a free, easy, early win for people.
Yeah.
I
started with cold showers as well before we moved here, which helped. And certainly when we got here and I started the cold water swimming, I looked into Wim Hof quite a lot. So the Iceman Wim Hof. So just to make sure what I was doing was safe and not dangerous. But yeah, there's lots of stuff about the benefits of the immune system, even doing cold showers and getting into that routine. So yeah, definitely recommend it.
Fair enough. Well, let's jump into the first topic. We're trying to take the podcast seriously. Therefore, we've been very mature and written a couple of things we'll talk about so we can tick them off the list. Otherwise, you find you'll get to the end of the podcast and congratulate each other for being so interesting and amazing, and then realise you've forgotten the meat in the sandwich. So the first one is understanding uncertainty, which actually we touched on in the newsletter sent out to all the Whole Man Academy guys this morning, funny enough. But tell us from your point of view, how you would talk about the best way to understand uncertainty and what it means for you.
Yeah, so a lot of this comes from looking at neuroscience, so looking at how the brain works and how it's set up and operates. And if you can understand that, then it just helps you with an increased level of awareness into what's going on. And that in itself creates a certain sense of peace and comfort, if you like. So there's a few things going on. There's like 3 particular ones I wanted to mention. One is about predicting the future. So the brain is like a massive prediction machine. It just spends all its time trying to work out what's going to happen next. because if it can, that's like a massive advantage to being able to live in the world. So consequently, we get this hit of dopamine every time things work out as we planned, which is partly why gambling can be so addictive, because when it works out, you get this massive hit of dopamine.
Right.
So there's that going on all the time. So if you're in circumstances like this, when things are just not going according to any sort of plan, then you don't get that hit of dopamine. And actually, it's the opposite. You get this sort of sense of loss, this sense of disappointment going on. So that's the one thing.
Right.
The other is like the opposite. So you get this hit of dopamine for things that are the same, but then you get a bigger one when things change. So like novelty, which is why, how marketing works, that you change things and your attention is drawn to that thing. Again, that's a safety thing. In the environment around us, we want to see when things change. We want to take notice of them. So we like things to be consistent on the one hand, and then we like things to change on the other, which can be really confusing. So emotionally at the moment, a lot of us are all over the place because our whole world and environment's changing, but it's also quite exciting, but not in a particularly positive way. And then the third thing is about routine. So as we go about our daily life, we put things into routine. We've talked about morning routine already. Once we've done that, we don't think about it anymore. It becomes part of our day-to-day activity, and it frees up our conscious thinking for doing other things. Now, under these times of change, we're constantly rethinking how to do things. I can't go out. Where do I buy my food from? Who can I speak to? How do I do my job?
Yeah.
And that is hugely effortful. So that does, they've demonstrated that the more time you spend doing that, you sort of run out of oomph for doing it if you're not careful. So those are the three main components you've got going on. You want things to be the same, you get hits of dopamine. When things change, you get hits of dopamine. And there's an effort involved in working out new routines in response to changing circumstances.
So what would the chaps that we're listening to this, what would you consider for them is the best way forward for managing that you're going to have uncertainty and actually dealing with it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the first thing is awareness. So knowing that's how it works. And I guess the other thing to add in that is we have this negativity bias. So we tend to be 5 times more likely to notice or pay attention to things that are negative than positive. So just knowing that's going on is helpful. You go, okay, I understand why I'm responding to the world like that. That's perfectly normal. So it's that awareness. And then it's moving into acceptance and going, well, things are as they are. I'm a bit of a one for going, I wish I'd done this, or I wish I hadn't done that. And, I know, because this is my field, that doesn't really do any good, but it doesn't stop me doing it. Yeah. So it's something about just that level of acceptance and going, things are as they are. And I've got this question, which is, what's correct? Is it at your expectation or reality? And it is clearly reality. So it's always our expectations that are off. But it's perfectly reasonable to be making expectations. That's what we do in our lives.
Can you repeat that question again?
Yeah.
Because it sounds like one of those questions. It's a bit like some of the stuff that Scott, our creative director, will say, and I'll go, yep, and then I need time to process it before I can actually bring up my own personal, answer. So chuck us the question again.
Okay. So the question is, when something happens, what is correct? Is it reality or your expectation as to what was going to happen?
Right. Second time round, it feels a bit clearer in my tiny pea brain.
Okay.
So how would you explain that to the man on the street who maybe, even though you hear it twice, would nod their head, but actually they're not quite sure, what that might mean to them?
So I'd say that we're always making predictions, and that the likelihood of things working out exactly as planned is slim. So they're going to work out slightly better or a lot better, or slightly worse or a lot worse. And that we'll have a response to that. And that is the part of the feedback loop response. So that's a helpful response, but it's be aware that it's happening. So when things work out as expected, we feel great. So we don't tend to dwell on that particularly. When things don't work out as expected positively, we don't feel so good and we get that drop, and it can send us into a downward spiral. So I just said, noticing, particularly when things don't work out expected in a negative way, but understanding that's just a normal process, is that it's perfectly reasonable for us to spend our time making predictions based on assumptions as to what's happening in the world. But the more dramatically those predictions come out differently, or the more dramatically those assumptions are incorrect, determines the sort of size of gap of emotion that we feel, whether that's a small drop or a massive increase as well.
And I guess it's a good point, especially at the moment, because of the level of uncertainty for all of us. Many people, if you're listening to this swiftly after it's being recorded, the world has kind of been turned upside down by the coronavirus, and some people don't know, maybe if they're going to see loved ones a while. Kids don't know if they're going to school. People don't know if they're having their jobs back. And I guess that for a lot of people, I think is probably one of the biggest challenges we'll have ever faced at the moment, because we've never seen anything like this. It reminds me of the kind of saying, we can't help what happens to us, but we can help how we react to it. So how do you apply this, the understanding uncertainty? How do you apply it in your life?
Well, it's going through those things. It's that awareness, it's that acceptance. And then the third thing is orientation. So it's actually, what do you now do as a result of that information? How do you sort of go forward? And it's basically, it's repeat, it's rinse and repeat. It's saying, look at the new world reality that you've got, and to the best of your ability, sort of with a fresh set of eyes, try and look forward and work out what to do next. So using the experience that you've got from the programming that you've now received in order to make a new set of predictions, which could equally be wrong, but it's something to go on to.
So let's say that, for example, let's say that we've got a guy listening who, let's say his job's not going very well and he thinks he is going to lose his job. Where would you start with kind of discussing with him the kind of steps you would take to take him through it?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I guess accepting that is a possible outcome, and then looking through what the potential scenarios are around that. But ultimately, we can be tremendously resourceful people, and I know we're going to go on to talk about some of the stuff we've learned with Tony Robbins in the past. It's about bringing all that resourcefulness to bear. So I guess one of the things to bear in mind is that when we're in a negative or slightly shut down state, we tend to be less creative, and less energetic and less forward thinking. So those negative experiences tend to put us into that position. So again, it's being aware of that, doing something like a mindfulness exercise, going for a walk or a run, changing your state can help you get that. And then trying to take that positive mindset and go, okay, we are where we are. What have I got that's available to me? How can I take that forward? And often, speaking to other people. So one thing I've been doing over the last few days is just talking to as many people as possible, getting their experiences, understanding how they're seeing the world. And gradually, it's starting to build this sort of new world picture that I can see I can navigate my way through. Just as an example of that, there's stuff that I could be doing in the short term, but there's also things that I could now be doing to prepare for the slightly longer term. So when things pick back up again, I'm in a really good position for it.
That's a really important point, isn't it? And I know, going back to speaking with Scott about this, because it's a similar situation for a lot of people that are maybe self-employed and or have got a business, but it's pretty much ground to a halt at the moment. It's maybe the opportunities are out there, and the good thing at the moment is that maybe you do have more time in your hands. It's enforced by not being able to go out, but actually we could all decide to just sit and watch Netflix all day and scratch ourselves. But actually saying, right, do you know what, let's look at this as I've got X amount of days or weeks or maybe months at home. What can I start creating and what can I start building for the future? Which I think for all of us means that you're in a more positive state than if you just sit and watch Game of Thrones or something.
Well, I talk about. I was using the phrase like it's a bit like a contractor's holiday. So I used to do some contracting, and when you're in a contract, it's great. The money's good, and then you have a break between contracts, and you think, well, that's fantastic. I've got maybe a couple of months when I can just chill out and recover. Yeah. But you're always wondering, when's the next money going to come in? So there's that sort of, it's a bit of a mixed blessing. So people have got time, but they may not have the certainty of money. Yeah. And there's no easy answers for that. There are some supports being made, and I'm in that position. I'm in the position you talk about. It's very challenging for small organisations relying on others at this point.
Well, talking about it being challenging, we touched briefly on morning routine, but also talk to me about for yourself gratitude. Now, I asked that because on our Instagram stories we put on one of the questions, which is just, what are you up to today? And one of the guys, who's a friend of mine, replied back and said, I think it was pretty much, I'm hiding under my duvet, and feeling overwhelmed. And I replied back and said, just to start with 10, send me 10 or 5 or 10 things that you're grateful for at the moment, because it's so easy for us all to focus on the shit that's going on around us. And, if you turn the news on, all it tells you is how many people have died, which, having flashed up, I found myself keep looking and looking, and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, this isn't going to help me. So for yourself, how would you, do you, and if you do, how do you apply gratitude to your life at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, over the years, I've developed a model that works for me called the 5 mindsets. And it's about being in this, I was talking about we're more creative and more productive when we're positive as opposed to negative.
Yeah.
So it's being aware of the things that put you into that negative state. I've talked about some of those already. And then the things that get you into that positive state, and actually, changing your mindset into that. And gratitude is a really simple but powerful one. And it's funny, actually, when you ask people, what are you grateful for? When I do this in workshops, it sometimes takes a while for people to go, no, we don't necessarily bring it to mind. So yeah, I use gratitude, and in fact, I tie that in with the morning swim. So it's an outdoor pool. When I'm in the pool, in the winter, freezing, beautiful in the summer, and I just look up to the sky and I just think, wow, it's amazing. I'm alive. It's a beautiful day, whatever the weather's doing, and it just anchors it, and it's just part of that morning routine. And the same, again, if you find yourself in a negative state, it is being thankful for the things that you have. But I want to be clear there, this isn't just about pretending the negative stuff isn't there, or it doesn't happen. There aren't some real challenges and dangers. There absolutely are, but they're not all that there is, and it's about getting that back.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I know we spoke to one of the guys that's come to some of the Whole Man Academy events, and he was having a bit of a challenging time. And I said to him, before we speak, just to change his kind of change his physiology, as it were, is let me know the 5 things that you are grateful for. And he came back and said, I've thought of 4. And I said, is there anything else? And he said, no. And I said, well, look, if you're totally stuck for one extra thing on your gratitude list, just be thankful that the sun's come up this morning.
Yeah.
Because if the sun doesn't come up, we really are all screwed. So, sometimes it's saying, right, just stop and breathe for a minute and think, there are plenty of things. Often it can be the smallest thing, but, just having a break from possibly the negative thinking that's going on at the moment can be quite powerful.
Yeah, and I think you're right about the news. Generally the news tends to play to the negative. So you do have to be careful. And also looking after what you watch. So a lot of the TV programs will tend to focus on the negative. And in fact, I found myself watching a Netflix series recently. Somebody recommended it. It was great, but the stories were they were great stories, but they were also quite negative. Mm-hmm. And I found that really wasn't helping with everything else that's going on. Taking that sort of break wasn't a break at all. I just felt even more stressed after I finished watching one series. So yeah, just being conscious of that. I talk about situation, story, and state. So you look at the situation that you're in. You look at the story that you're telling yourself about that situation, and then that will tend to put you in a sort of state. So sometimes change the situation. We can't necessarily do that at the moment. Mm. And if not, then at least examine your story and see if you can tell yourself a better story. And that will either tend to put you into a better state, if possible. And if not, and frankly, like yesterday, I had some good news and some bad news. I was a bit all over the place, frankly. But finding things that you can do, going out for a run, watching something fun, singing, dancing, preferably positive things. So yeah, you might end up, drinking isn't necessarily a great one. Drug taking isn't necessarily a great one. It's things that change your state, but not in a particularly productive way. So do be careful of that. But yeah, changing yourself so you're in a better state, and then that's cyclical, because once you're in a better state, you find your situations better,
make better decisions, and what do you like at singing?
Say that again.
What do you like at singing?
Oh, all right, at singing. Yeah, quite enjoy it. Yeah, I can do a bit of dancing. There you go.
I thought you had a spider down your jumper. So let's move on to the big man. And I'm going to talk about Tony Robbins. Mm-hmm. That's actually how we both met, isn't it? Which was how many years ago now?
It's 5 years ago. Nearly 6, actually, 2015. Yeah.
Okay. And I was actually asked earlier about how he affected my life. And I said, I I think it's totally helped me transform my life by kind of, you know, Tony Robbins coming into my life and going to his events and spending time with him. But tell us yourself, how did you first kind of hear about Tony Robbins, and how would you know, what would you say he has contributed to your life?
I guess I started with reading reading some of his books and his material, audiobooks. So I would regularly listen to audiobooks, and I came across Unleash the Power Within, and really enjoyed it. Yeah, really sort of like the style, and read some more. And then I was conscious of UPW, so the Unleash the Power Within was happening in London with all the firework and that sort of thing. And I'm quite an immersive learner. I really like to sort of be in a situation. So I thought, let's do it. So I got myself down to London, 4 days intensive input and fun and dancing and jumping about and energy. And yeah, I just really enjoyed that environment. And it went on from there. As a result of that, signed up for the Business Mastery University, and then the Life and Wealth University, and also Date with Destiny. And yeah, it was there in where was it we met? Where in? What's the name of the place in Spain?
In Tenerife, was it? Is that where
Tenerife.
we first?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was Tenerife that we first met. And
well, tell me about that, because that was an interesting one, because it's pretty much, for people that don't know, Life and Wealth Mastery is part of a kind of the course of events that you can go to. That was stretched over roughly 8-10 days or something, and we were slumming it at the Ritz in Tenerife, which is very nice. And you know, again, unsurprisingly, it's about your life and your wealth. And the first thing I remember about it was actually doing is it 5 rhythms or 5 levels of dance?
Oh yeah.
What's your take on that? And do you remember the actual? It was an afternoon where we all had to get involved with it.
Well, that's an interesting question. So for me, even on the UPW, the jumping about and the hugging and all of that stuff, I'm sort of fairly reserved, and that was all a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But by, I don't know, a few hours in, or the first day, I was actually really rather enjoying it. So when we got to Tenerife, it was pretty well all in for me. So I was quite happy to try anything. And you know, everyone there was having a go. It was a bit of fun. And I really like that movement and dance. I think one thing I enjoyed about all of the Robbins events was the amount of movements. I mean, I regularly now use a standing desk, so I'm stood now, because I find that I think better when I'm moving about. I've even got a small stepper, which I use at my workplace. The only thing is it creaks, so if I'm on the phone to somebody, it sounds like I'm in a rocking bed, which isn't the greatest greatest impression to give. So I really liked all that. What about you? What did you think of it?
I remember just thinking that it was really nuts, especially because we were in a conference room, you know, at the hotel, and it was only, I don't know if I remember correctly, like it was early afternoon, and they turned all the lights off, pretty much shut the doors, and they asked you to kind of dance this music. And you know, being, I don't know, English and mildly reserved, and you just think we all just look like a bunch of dicks. And then it's funny how we went to level 2 and level 3, and the music changed. And within a while, I found that I was, you know, whirlwinding round and doing all these crazy dances. And I kind of thought, if someone walked in now and looked at us, they would think that we're all completely bonkers. But it was actually a really good experience. And like you say, I think it's, for those events, you know, it's so much more than just the movement and or the personal development. It's the connections you make whilst you're there. And I guess for us, I mean, we basically lived together, didn't we, for a whole week? So apart from bathroom activities, we basically spent all of our time together for a whole week. And we were quite different in our views on things, but actually, you know, we speak about the Whole Man Academy, getting around guys that aren't exactly the same as you, develop some of the skills that maybe you didn't have. And it gave me more of an understanding of what was important to you in life. And maybe I remember slapping your legs and telling you to sit up straight and what have you. So maybe it's one of those where we all learn from each other, which is a bit like the Whole Man Academy events. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, there were people there that were just very different from the people that I would normally meet day to day, and made some great connections, you being one of those. And I know you, me, and another chap called Mark have kept in touch with each other every 6 to 8 weeks ever since, and those connections have been amazing. And again, it's being brought into contact with people from literally all over the world who I wouldn't have otherwise done, but who were interested, well, not just interested in personal development, they were also prepared to make the time and financial commitment to actually get themselves out there and do something about it. And that's been that whole, I think that whole community, and just being aware of other people being prepared to and interested at operating at another level, because that was really good.
Well, that's a good point, operating at another level, because probably for both of us, we met people that maybe in some ways in their life they were doing better than us. Maybe they had an established business, or maybe they had a fantastic relationship, or their health was absolutely a 10 out of 10. And I guess for yourself and I, personal development, I didn't really know much about it probably till I was maybe 35 or 36. But actually coming to those events, I immersed myself in it, and I totally have transformed my life since then. But did you, when you got into the personal development with Tony Robbins, was there one kind of segment of the pie chart, cheesecake, something that's got segments, that you felt was the one thing you needed to work on?
Oh, that's a good question. What was the one thing I needed to work on? It's probably overcoming fear. Yeah, it's a combination of things. And I guess I did this in connection. So I've had a coach for over 10 years. So that's also been part of my journey. So overcoming fear was one. I had something that came to mind a second ago, which is totally gone, but I'll come back to that. So yeah, it was that sense of stepping out of your comfort zone, or bringing discomfort into your life, if you like, is another way of looking at it, and being able to take some chances, which I guess is why I was there in the first place, because I saw just actually taking myself out of my normal routine and making that time and effort and investment to go somewhere, to travel somewhere I wouldn't normally.
Because it's a lot of money, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a reasonable investment. And
how much, if you had to put a ballpark figure, how much do you think the events cost you for going through the Tony Robbins program, as it were?
I guess paying for the events, and then all of the travel and accommodation and time not working, probably best part of 20 grand, I'd have thought. Yeah. How about you?
I didn't do the business one. So I reckon, I think I did it once, and I thought, with the travel and the hotels, it's probably about 15,000. But as long as you've got 15,000, I think it's money very, very well spent. And what you're going to ask me now is, what do you think I need to work on?
So, Anne, what do you think you need to work on?
Oh, you really surprised me with that question. It's turning my bloody notifications off on my email. So when I'm talking to people on Zoom, it doesn't keep going bing. But anyway, we'll put that on the list. So in fact, we were going to talk about this a little bit later in the podcast, but you mentioned that you and I spent some time also with a friend of ours called Mark, who again, we met on the Tony Robbins events. And one of the things we realized when we got back was it was accountability and having, a check-in with some friends. Now, whether that's about your productivity, procrastination, your success and celebrating it, and or just having someone, quite frankly, to emotionally vomit all the things that you're pissed off about on. How has it worked for you with talking to myself and Mark? Probably once every 6 weeks, 8 weeks, something like that.
Yeah, once every 6 to 8 weeks. I think the biggest thing, it was just, the conversations themselves were useful. We've been through some quite challenging times between the three of us on different, day sessions that somebody would be going through some trauma or other.
Yeah.
I think it's sort of not looking into any one specific, but taking the whole thing. It was just remaining connected with that was sort of that bigger picture of personal development. When I talk to you and I talk to Mark, I'm reminded that I went off and did those things, and that was part of, like I said, operating at a different level. So I think it keeps you accountable to that overall principle and that overall goal, as well as helping you with those individual ones. Yeah, how about you? What do you think?
Well, I was going to say, I think for both of us, and I'm sure Mark would say as well, I touched on it there, but sometimes you would forget to celebrate your success. And we all have left, let's say, corporate backgrounds and moved in our own directions. But sometimes, the old saying, you can't see wood for the trees. is that I'd jump on a call and actually just in discussing what's been going on, I'd realise, oh yeah, actually I have achieved this and this and this, but I've forgotten about it because sometimes what you haven't achieved has been the overwhelming thought on your mind. And maybe for guys listening to this, that is one of those, again, it's so simple now because your friend or friends can be anywhere in the world. You know, you can jump on Zoom, Skype, FaceTime, whatever. You've got pot and some string, but you know, having a little, you know, 1 to 2 people, including yourself. Sorry, so you might have 3 of you that's like your little accountability buddies. I think can be priceless and can carry on. You could have 2 different. You could have business ones, personal ones, fitness ones, what have you. I think it's priceless.
Yeah, and actually, I think at a time like now, in particular, when everyone's going through so much change, just checking in with everyone, checking everyone's okay, but also just seeing how they're adjusting to change, seeing what their view of the world is. I found that's made it much easier to be able to start to form opinions as to what I do next, and just sounding out some of your decisions as well.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that we found, we can be very honest with each other about what we're doing, and that's hugely important. And again, as you know, as men, we're not always very good at that. We're not always good at talking to our friends about things that really matter to us. But those things still happen. And in some ways, we take those responsibilities very, very seriously. They're very important to us. And unless we've got people that we can share and talk those through with, they tend to end up in our heads. In fact, that was the thing I was going to talk about. You asked me some of the benefits from being at Robbins. It was living in my head. So, you know, engineering, analytical, IT, all that sort of thing. I was very sort of head-based. And the combination of the stuff with Tony, which was very sort of physical, and working with my coach was about shifting from head more down to heart. So I'd say I'm balanced now, probably slightly more heart than just head.
Yeah.
But you'll see that in the stuff that I do. So all the material that I developed is quite it's quite structured and analytical, which I think is helpful. But it's very much coming from a heart-based place rather than a head-based place. And I think men need to talk to each other, otherwise we just end up in our own space and in our heads. Actually, just talking about self-isolation, 1 or 2 blokes I've spoken to have said, that's fantastic. You know, that's just how I like to live. I'm actually getting permission to do what I like. I mean, I'm being a flippant, but for some people that does suit them, but it's not always a good thing.
Yeah, I guess for everybody, it's I was talking to a chap the other day, and we said about the similar self-isolation, and actually, maybe for some people it would be a good thing, because if you're not ill and you actually get a chance to be on your own, maybe that actually kind of helps you reassess what's important to you in life. And here's a question I wrote down: is what do you do for fun?
What do I do for fun? That's an interesting question.
Apart from look at pictures of me.
Yeah, no, well, I get to do that regularly. I enjoy my swimming. I play football. I really enjoy my football.
Do you?
Say that again?
Do you play football?
Yeah, I play football on a Sunday night. I played 7-a-side for about, 15 or 20 years, I think it is.
John, we've been friends for 5 years, and I never knew that you played football.
Yep. I think what's quite funny about it is I wasn't very good at school, so I didn't tend to play or didn't get picked.
Yeah.
I started playing when shortly after my son was born, partly to get the exercise and distraction, but also something that we could do together as he got older. He's now over 20. But I actually found myself organising it, and it's been great. So I get to pick the teams, and I'm definitely the oldest person there now. Most of the others are in their late teens, early 20s, a few in their 30s.
Yeah. So
that really keeps me energetic and fresh. So I love the swimming. I like walking. I enjoy playing football.
Yeah.
Spending time with the family. I to be fair as well, I love what I'm doing in work. It's a change that's taken time to come to fruition, but when I'm doing my work, I really enjoy it. So it tends to blur the edges between work and pleasure and all those other things.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Well, how about you? What do you get up to?
What do I do for fun? These days, I miss playing football. But what I do for fun, a lot of the time I spend actually talking to friends. I spoke to a coach, a life coach, probably about 1.5 years ago, and she said to me, what are your highest values? And I said before, one of them is fun. It always has. I'm capable of being sensible and getting things done, but it's, you know, it's a lot easier if things are fun and the people are fun around you. And actually at the time I realized I wasn't spending much time having fun. And she
Having
said,
fun.
well, who could you know, what could you do to bring more fun into your life? And I realized that obviously it's the people around me.
Mm.
And now I make sure that I spend more time talking to those people that I have fun with. And it's priceless, to be honest, because if you can, you know, it doesn't matter what your day's going like, if you then spend some time laughing with someone, often you forget about what it was, which I think is simple and powerful, which sums up some of my friends I used to play football with. But anyway, so let's talk about.
Sorry, just before we move on, just on that. So we usually end up. I mean, we're a family of 5. But we usually end up with more around the meal table, and that's a lot of fun. So just getting together, having a meal, having a chat, and just having fun around the meal table. You know, it's that sense of connection. That's a great part of the day.
Write that one down. I think it's important to remember, isn't it? Because, you know, again, we can go through certain times in our life where things are challenging. But again, if you said, right, do you know what? Here's my toolkit. I'm going to be mindful of what I'm grateful for is one thing, and who could I speak to, or what could I do that I enjoy that, you know, brings some fun into my life. Could be the thing that just, you know, takes your day from down there up to a higher level. Well, the next thing we're going to talk about is, you know, your link with the Whole Man Academy. You are part of the team, a valued member, and really, you know, the Whole Man Academy was started because we wanted to change the landscape for mental health for men. And that's where we brought yourself in, because we want to have, you know, kind of 2 parts to the Whole Man Academy. You have your personal development parts, but also, you know, you need to have the mental health and the mental health workshops. So tell us about how you have been brought into the company, why, and kind of what you're doing with the workshops we're providing.
Yeah, so I mean, when you talked about the original vision for the Whole Man with Matt, you know, I thought that was fantastic. That opportunity for men to talk, and came to the first few events. It was, you know, it was a great atmosphere. It's somewhere I love being. I also had the opportunity to contribute, which was fantastic. And I think over time, as the vision formed and became, you know, you brought it to fruition, we could see that there was a need there to have some material that enabled people to put into practice some of the things that we talked about. So my approach, and this was really me taking all the stuff that I'd learned from doing personal development and wanting to take it to other people, you know, sort of wanting to share it with others. And at the time, I was keeping away from mental health. I thought that's not something I want to be dealing with particularly, because of, you know, not being medically trained in that space and feeling like there was enough provision in that area potentially. So I just wanted to be working with people that were not struggling with their mental health at the moment, but could lead a better quality of life with some of the tools that we've learned and developed over time. What I realized fairly quickly was actually the material that I'd got was very similar to what you'd be taught if you had a mental ill health condition. So some of the fundamentals of CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, and ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy. Those same tools are fantastic and, you know, crossed over with the things that I picked up for living a better quality life. So that's where this 5 mindsets came from. We talked about one already, which is the gratitude. There's also forgiveness. There's courage, being courageous. There's having purpose, and there's also being at peace. So across those sort of 5, and bringing in some of the neuroscience research that I've been involved with, created a framework which actually supports people in their mental health, preferably before you find yourself with a mental ill health condition. I mean, a lot of this for me came from an experience I had just over 10 years ago, when I, you know, sort of went as close to that as I really wanted to. And I was like, what do I need to do to keep myself well?
Yeah.
And it was all those sorts of things. So, you know, it was very personally driven from my own experience, from the experience of some of my family members who have struggled. And then just a real desire to go, well, hold on a sec, you know, we shouldn't be teaching people good thinking skills when they're ill. We should be teaching them those when they're well. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think there was a connection then to say, well, you know, we want to get people together. We want to get people to talk, yes, socially, but also, you know, work has a huge opportunity to make a difference to people. So actually just having a job, being in a working environment, is already really good for your well-being and your mental health. And
is that because it gives you a sense of purpose or structure?
Yeah, all of those things. So it gives you a sense of purpose. So you connect with, there's your contribution and there's the contribution of the organization you're working for.
Yeah.
There is the structure, there's the order to the day, you've got the social contact potentially as well. So that there's a number of components where work significantly contributes towards well-being. And then on top of that, workplaces have the opportunity to train and to develop people. So I think, taking this sort of stuff out to the workplace is a really important way of reaching people.
So what are some of the, I know now what we're developing is, say, an online course, but also obviously the ability, when the world returns to whatever normal is or was, to actually go into the corporate environment. And what kind of companies have you spoken at already?
So as in what type of companies?
Yeah.
Oh, it's been a full range. I guess part of the time initially it was just trying to sound out to see which type of companies responded better in order to find a niche. I've got a particular interest in more technical organizations, so engineering, IT, I guess financial, those sorts of, again, that sort of technical mindset, if you like, but certainly not exclusively. I've been into energy companies, I've been into automotive companies, I've been into solicitors, I've been into retail companies, I've been into other sort of service companies, IT companies. So it's really been quite a range. And I suppose fundamentally it's got people in it, and I understand the benefits of niching and the importance from a marketing perspective. It doesn't help to say, oh, it's great for anybody. But I mean, actually universities, and I've even done work with some in schools as well. So the material is sort of so simple that it works for the children, works for the parents, and works for the teachers as well. And that's what I love about it. It's really easy to pick up, and it's easy to use across a whole sort of range of people.
So do you think that's one of the important bits is it is easy to pick up? Because I guess it doesn't really matter what the topic is. We've all sat in on, let's say, a company event or a conference or a workshop where as soon as someone stands up, after a while, people, you kind of glaze over a little bit. So is that how you've tried to create it, is actually, making it easy to, not just to follow, but easy to remember, so you actually can apply it when needed?
Yeah, I quite like acronyms and that sort of thing. I've got one which happens to be the name of my son, which is SAM, which is simple, applicable, and memorable. And I keep those three in mind. So it's just because if it might be the best material in the world, but if you can't remember it and you can't apply it, then it's really a waste of time.
Yeah.
And for most people, this isn't. It could be, but it isn't on the top of their agenda. So it's got to be something that can be really simple to pick up, and ideally share across a wide range of people, but also then potentially have the depth to be able to go into if you want to. So if it's just a case of just simple awareness, a simple set of tools, then it's there. If you've got the time and the interest and the need to go into more detail, then it can go into depths. Like I said, bringing in CBT and DBT and ACT, and also the neuroscience and spirituality as well.
What do you think has changed, which means that in the last, let's say the last 3 years, suddenly companies are waking up to the fact that, say mental health in the workplace and the need to have, your staff kind of brought up to speed on the awareness of mental health? What's changed?
I think there's a number of things. I think one of them is the degree to which mental health is impacting companies from a financial perspective. Now, I think there's various reasons for that. I think there's been tremendous progress made in physical safety. So sometimes you think about the health and safety executive, the HSC, it's traditionally been very focused on physical safety, but actually mental health is as much a part of that. It's just not really had that emphasis. So lots of companies have put lots of time and resource and energy into physical safety.
Yeah.
But as we've become less physical in our jobs and more mental and more mind-based, and the world has become more complex and there's much more choice, and we've got 24-hour operations, and we've got access to the world immediately through our phones.
Yeah.
That level of overwhelm on our minds is starting to take its toll. So I think it's a great time to be learning how to do things differently. I mean, think of my own kids, and 10 years ago there was we just got the first smartphones, but there were no iPads and that sort of thing. They were just starting to come in. The world has fundamentally changed, and the way we do work has fundamentally changed. And we don't necessarily have an up-to-date tool set for dealing with that.
Yeah.
I think in addition to that, the government came out with a report in 2017, the Thrive at Work report, and that's been really central to articulating what the challenge is. It identifies in there some Deloitte research which shows the cost to businesses, the areas that they need to focus, things like absenteeism, presenteeism, a bit of leavism and staff turnover as well. And in fact, Deloitte updated their figures in January of this year, showing that it was the costs were even higher than we thought they were, but also the return on investment. So when you do spend time and money looking at the well-being of your employees, then you can start to see that come back, full cycle. And it makes sense because it's about employee experience and employee engagement ultimately.
I guess the question I was thinking is, what do you, if you've gone into a company and put on a workshop for them, what do you want the outcome to be for the people on the workshop?
So ideally, I'd like to see changes happening throughout the whole organisation. I might only be a part of that, but I'm not really interested in just going and doing some training and leaving. So I'm looking for people to go away with a tool set that they can use on a daily basis. Ideally, one that they can share with their colleagues and their families. Yeah. And that they, it's just a different way of looking at the world. But through that, it improves. I suppose a simple measure would be, they've got the tools to spend more time in a positive mindset than a negative mindset, and therefore being more productive and less protective and more creative and those sorts of things. And actually there is another benefit because sadly, we talk about this at the event as well, that suicide is the primary cause of death in men up to the age of 45, 50, women up to the age of 35. That's a really sad statistic.
It's shocking, isn't it? Yep.
It is. And it's important that we tackle the situation that people are in when they're feeling suicidal. But there's another approach, which is to try and reduce the number of people getting to that position in the first place. Now, it's not always possible, but I've got this sort of idea. If you imagine a normal distribution curve and people feeling suicidal at the far side, if we can shift that whole curve just a little bit to the side, then we can reduce the number of people at risk. And it was Tony Rose, I think, last century came up with the public health curve, and he said the same was true for epidemiology. I guess you could apply it for the current virus. But if we can raise the baseline of well-being across everybody, then that will actually reduce the number of people at risk. And all being well, I'd like to see there being a reduction in the rate of suicide.
So really, I guess it's in a nutshell, it's raising the baseline of well-being for the staff.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's interesting because again, I worked in the city or around London for really big companies, and I left maybe 4 years ago, pretty much, and there was nothing for staff. Right. You had a helpline which no one's going to call. Maybe people do, but the people I sat around were not going to call it. No. And thankfully, I never felt like I ever got to that situation. But I think, now, had I have done, I don't know where you'd have turned. There was nowhere to go that didn't seem too drastic, to be honest. And maybe that's the great thing that's changing now is bringing people like yourself in to talk to the company means that it's raising awareness kind of for the average man at the company to say, okay, well, I've now got some other options, and know also, I guess, how to help other people.
Definitely. And that's an interesting reflection. And I think a number of companies would say that's the same. And I've talked to other companies that have got helplines, and there's an issue that people either don't know that they exist or wouldn't feel comfortable calling them because they feel that there's an issue. What was interesting about the Deloitte research that was updated in January was the return on investment for wellbeing is around 1 in 5. But it's actually not evenly spread. So if you're looking at responsive, so things like first aid, it's 1 in 3, or 1 in 3 return. But if you're doing proactive support, then that's 1 in 6. And if you're doing cultural change, that tends to be 1 in 7. so although it could be very tempting to go in just at the reactive space, and there needs to be some work there, actually the benefits that company get is from looking at the culture, making it acceptable for people to have conversations, which comes right all the way around back to the Whole Man Academy.
Yeah,
it's creating a situation to be able to have a conversation, to know how to have that conversation, to understand how to listen, and to listen non-judgmentally, to be aware of people, to be aware of what's normal for them and how their normal fits in with other people's normal, and spotting changes, which you could only do when you're having conversations. So in fact, I'm doing some work at the moment just to try and help companies understand what that continuum looked like, and where to put their effort to get the best return. And I don't just mean the financial return, I mean the well-being return as well. And it would appear to be, it's about the cultural change. So programs like Time to Change, I'm on the Time to Change steering committee in the county that I live in. Mm-hmm. There's other well-being programs that are available as well. But it's getting that culture change and making sure that people can have those conversations. Because ultimately, it's not the job of anyone in a business to diagnose somebody else. It's hard enough for the trained mental health staff to be able to diagnose conditions. So it's not about diagnosis, it's really about spotting change and then being able to signpost, and people feeling comfortable that they can A, have the conversation, and B, that it's okay to go and get the support that they need. Yeah. And then it's everyone else making appropriate adjustments, which we have to do all the time. We've already talked about our differences. We make adjustments for the differences between people, and sometimes we use those to our advantage as well. It makes a strong team.
Yeah.
But sometimes it becomes a problem for people.
It's such a new space, isn't it? All these companies that are opening up to this need to educate their workforce, but it can only be a good thing. And we're seeing the numbers pick up in either inquiries or actually getting chances to go in and not just having a few people there, but actually having a lot of mixed audience, male and female, who are interested in, again, even if it's not to do with them, maybe it's to do with them understanding how to help other people. Well, let's wrap it up by asking you, if you had some advice for the guys that are listening, if there was one or two things that you could say could help them, if they're finding things challenging at the moment, or about personal development, what would be the one or two little golden nuggets or chicken McNuggets you would lay down for them?
Yeah, the golden chicken McNuggets. I would say that self-awareness. So starting with self-awareness, and along with that, self-acceptance. So we can very easily get caught up in our own thinking. So it's just recognizing the brain is just a thinking machine. It just generates thoughts. They're not always that helpful. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. Just because we think something doesn't make it true, or doesn't mean that we have to act on it. So it's creating that slight separation that goes, I am not my thoughts. I am the person that's noticing that I'm thinking.
Right.
That gives you that separation. And then it's being, the word came, it'll come back in a minute. It's being sort of purposeful and intentional about your own mindset and your own thinking. It's recognizing, being aware how it works, what the mechanisms are. And then it's learning to go with it and learning to play with it. We have a lot less control than we like to think we do over the world in general, and even our own thinking. So being respectful of that, but then doing things about the things that we can, that will help us to get into the right mindset. And that's not just in the head, that's physically as well. So it's getting your exercise, making sure that you sleep well. It's eating, quality, good types of foods, which are good for the body and the brain. It's thinking about what matters to you and trying to put more time into that, and how you ultimately serve other people. Happiness isn't necessarily something we can attain in its own right, but we can get a sense of fulfillment and contentment in the way that we provide service to others, which is actually where, again, companies come in. Yeah. Companies are a fantastic way of being able to contribute. So I'd even say that, look at what matters to you. Are you managing to put that into your work? Because you'll get a lot of meaning and value from that. And if not, then either have a conversation with your boss, or look at the organisation that you're in, because that's I'd say that's actually a massive part. Mm-hmm. And those are journeys that both you and I have been on, to look at what matters to us and to gradually reorientate that around so that we're spending more of our time doing it.
Well, I think that's an important point, because maybe sometimes the realization needs to be that just because you might have had a career or it could be a relationship that actually you've really enjoyed for X amount of time. But sometimes, you might have been in that job for 10 years and then you just kind of decide you want to do something else. And I think for a lot of guys, maybe that listening to this, would be in their 30s or 40s and could get to that situation where I did, where, in my mid to late 30s, you thought, I'm not sure if this is what I want to be doing for the rest of my life, or at least the next 20 years. But we said that actually, having a plan of action is the important part of it. And how would you say, with yourself, when you left, let's say, the corporate environment, did you have a plan, or was it something that something snapped one day, or how did it come out for you?
That's an interesting, because I was spat out of the corporate environment because I was in the automotive industry, and the company I was working for went into administration. But I had been thinking a little while before then. So I think my plan, I did a workshop in 2000, and I've got the notes from it. And it was around being a speaker and an author and being involved in development. So that's been something there. I've got a very strong faith, and for me, being able to bring some of that into to what I do and how I do it was important. So coaching is a great way of having conversations with people. I guess that you can't. Sometimes you can have a very specific plan and you can work towards it. Sometimes you just have the next stage and you work towards that, and then you see what happens. And I think both of those are valid, and actually just being responsive to the circumstances. Like again, where we started, you make plans, they don't always work out as you expect, and it's the opportunity to go, well, I thought this was what I wanted to do, but now I've done it. It's not quite, but unless you do it, you'll never know. So it's about making taking action, isn't it? Ultimately,
that's a good point. Is actually not trying to plot everything out in front of you, but I know when I was on one of the events with David Key, who's on the coaches I've worked under, and it was very much about just knowing what's the next step, because that it might go either way. If you're looking to move in one direction the whole way, it's going to go off on a tangent. But knowing what the very next step is sometimes all you need, and then kind of and then what's the next step. Well, the next step is for me to say goodbye to you and let you disappear off into the weekend. And hopefully when we get the online courses up, perhaps you'll come back on and have a chat to us about how they work and what the benefits are to the guys of the Whole Man Academy. Yeah, that would be great. It's been great spending time with you again, Hans. Perfect. Right. Well, on that bombshell, I will let you go and have a lovely weekend. And John, we will see you soon. All right. All the best. See you, mate. See ya.